Welcome back to a new episode, and today I'm going to talk about how owning rental properties work and how you can make passive income doing it. My name is Brian Tran. I'm a business owner and real estate investor that owns over 15 doors, generating $30,000 a month in rental income. Let me first start by saying that owning rental properties will not get you rich quick. Contrary to what everybody tells you that owning property is going to make you super rich, it really doesn't. When I break down the video, you're going to see that the monthly isn't going to blow your mind or change your life. However, rental income gives you two things: stability and a solid foundation to continuously build with each year to come. So let's start with how owning rental property works. In short, you buy a property, you find a renter, that renter will then rent the home for you for a profit, and that's simply how rental income works. But to dive deeper, you need to first understand that there are actually two types of rental property investment strategies. The first are the cash flow investors, and the primary focus for these type of investors is to generate a monthly income that they can then spend and use and fund their lifestyle and ultimately buy more rental properties. Here's a quick example of what their investment strategy looks like. So for the simple sake of math, we're going to use easy numbers. The investor will go out, they'll look for a property that, let's say, is $100,000. They will put 30% down, they will finance $70,000, which roughly costs about $700 a month in mortgage, property tax, and insurance. Now, assuming, that the homes in that area are renting for $1,200, they will find a renter to pay $1,200. You take $1,200, you minus the $700 in monthly expenses, leaves you with a profit monthly of $500. Pretty good. And that's the logic that these cash flow investors look for. Side note, if your rental property is bringing in $500 a month and you only put $30,000 down, if you do the math, which is, $500 a month times 12, right? 12 months out of the year, 6,000. 6,000 divided by 30,000, which is how much you put out, you're making a 20% return on your money. That's phenomenal. Now, back to the YouTube show. The second type of investors I work with are what I like to call the appreciation investor. They don't care too much about the cash flow. Typically, these guys are already making a boatload of money somewhere else, and ultimately, they want to buy for the long haul. And so they're buying properties that are going to appreciate. That, let's say they buy today for $100,000 and then 3-4 years from now it goes up to $150,000, $200,000. That's what they're typically looking for. But let me run through an example of how these investors like to buy rental properties. These type of investors typically buy in high appreciating markets like California. They buy a property that may just break even. They don't make any cash flow whatsoever, right? But at least all the expenses are covered. But in California, historically speaking, every 10 years, the property value doubles, right? So if they buy a property today for $1 million, what they're hoping to bank on is that in 10 years from now, they will have a property that is worth $2 million. And now you're asking, well, what good does that do? What are they like? Okay, the property value is worth more. How do they get paid? This is how they do it. They will do two things. Number one, they can either sell the property and do a 1031 exchange, which is a way for people to defer taxes and move into a bigger and better property, right? Or they will do something called a cash out refinance, which is a non-taxable way to pull money out of your property. So for example, you bought a property for $1 million. It is now worth $2 million. The bank will typically allow you to borrow up to 70% of the value. 70% of $2 million, guys, right, is, if I do my math correctly, $1.4 million. Now, they only bought it for $1 million. So the other $400,000 they get to pull out. They don't have to pay taxes on it, and they can take that money, they can spend it, or they can go and buy more rental properties. That's one way that these investors make money. Now, before I go into real tactical advice on how you can own rental properties and create passive income, I want you to smash the thumbs up button, hit the subscribe, and now let me go into some more technical terms before we go into the real nitty gritty, okay? Now, when it comes to real estate investments, knowing those two types of investors, right? It's important to note that when you buy rental properties, there's three things that you're actually buying for. You're buying the property for, number one, appreciation. Number two, depreciation, which is, a taxable thing that saves you money. And if you want to learn more, I can make another video on that. And the third form is cash flow. Now, what most investors realize is that it is very hard to get all three. It's hard to buy a property that will cash flow, that will appreciate like crazy. The depreciation part is actually the easiest. You'll get it no matter what, as long as you buy rental properties, right? So you only get typically two. All right, so now that we got all the basics out of the way, let me give you the real tactical advice that I am currently doing to create massive amount of passive income so that I can fund my lifestyle, give me stability, take care of my family, and ultimately take bigger risk in business, because I know that every month I have a certain amount coming in that will cover my basic expenses. So remember how I brought up appreciation, depreciation, and cash flow? Well, currently, looking at my portfolio, I have a good amount of properties that are in California that are gonna appreciate and do very well. The problem with that is that when I'm buying in California, it is very capital intensive. It's very hard to scale. I don't want this taking up too much of my time, because ultimately I want to buy properties that will passively create cash flow without a whole lot of work. So the first thing we have to do is identify a region or state or even a city that is high cash flowing. And I'm gonna give you guys some examples, right? Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, and parts of Texas are great states that have high cash flow. Pick a state that you like. Ultimately, I decided to pick Alabama. Here's what I did next. I went on the Section 8 website. I figured out what was Section 8 paying for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Section 8 is a government subsidized program that helps pay for rent. Make sure that you guaranteed the rent no matter what the economy does, right? So this is a very key factor, because what you don't want is that property to deal with tenants that aren't going to pay, because that's going to kill your cash flow. The next thing I did was find properties that were between $115,000 and $130,000. And the reason why is that if I stuck between those price points, I was going to make a 10 plus cash on cash return. If I paid $400,000 for a property and it was only getting $1,350 a month, I'm going to be negative, okay? That's the logic. I put 30% down on these property, so about $30,000 and some change. I financed the rest, and even with today's rate, I got a 7% interest for 20 years, okay? That came out with property tax, insurance, $700 a month. Now, at the time of this recording, my renters are paying $1,350 for that property. If you do the math, right, I get $1,350 minus everything, and this is including property management, which is 8%. I cash flow approximately $542 a month. $542 a month times the 5 properties I have, I'm bringing in $2,500 a month. Now remember how I told you you're not gonna really get super rich? Like $2,500 is great. It's amazing for me. But I live in California still, and that barely covers my kids' daycare. But I'm all about the long term. I know that if I continue to just buy these properties 1 a year, 2 a year, what's gonna happen is if I can just delay spending this and I keep rolling it back into properties, can you imagine what it's gonna look like in 10 years? At the minimum, if I only buy 1 a year for the next 10 years, I'm gonna have 10 properties making $500 a month, okay? Assuming rent doesn't go up, assuming that these properties don't appreciate, I'm gonna make $5,000 a month, $60,000 a year, right? And then now I can literally take that money and probably buy a property every single year with just that kind of income. That's the beauty of real estate. It's not to help you retire like in your 20s, and I know people who do it, but I'm just telling you, when you don't complicate things and you just look at life and rental in a longer horizon, guys, imagine in 20 years where you're gonna be. You're gonna be able to retire comfortably. You don't have to worry about Social Security covering your expenses. You're gonna have your rental properties. And then the best part is, guys, I truly believe that when you just get your feet wet in real estate, it leads to bigger deals. It gives you confidence to do other things. Remember how I told you that with my rental portfolio, it gives me the confidence to go out and be a little bit more risky when it comes to business. And ultimately, those businesses make me a whole lot more money than what these rental properties do. But it's establishing that foundation. It's establishing that, knowing that I don't have to starve. Like, I can live off of $5,000 a month or $2,500 a month if I really needed to. And that sense of security, guys, is what's going to propel you into doing bigger and greater things. And ultimately, let's say you don't and you want to just coast and take it easy. This is a great way too. Work a W-2 job, save your money, okay? Don't blow it. And you just keep buying 1 or 2 properties a year, 1 or 2 properties every single year. Get your spouse involved, and now you're buying probably 2 to 3 properties a year. And watch it compound so quickly. I can honestly say that all the properties that I bought way back when, I had no idea how much rent was going to be. Like, I'm collecting numbers today that I never would have thought be possible. But guess what? Population growth, the demand in housing is going up. You never know where it's going to be. It might only be $500 a month today. It could be $1,000 a month 2 years from now, $2,000 a month 3 years from now. And you'll be so glad that you just decided to buy one rental property. Guys, I hope you got a lot of value out of this video. I hope you see the passion that I have. I really am a believer in long-term wealth. I'm a believer that real estate is still a great vehicle to become a multimillionaire. You just have to start. And if you have any questions, you want to pick my brain, hit the comments, ask your questions. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.